Hello.
Hi,
How are
how are you?
you?
Good.
Good. It looks chilly where you are.
I'm in my car.
Oh,
But don't worry, I'm not driving.
Zoom safety, or I guess Instagram Live safety. I've done a couple of Zooms from my car as well.
Yeah, I can show you where I am, actually. I'm going to roll down my window. This is probably the most unconventional way to do this. Um,
Oh, wow, beautiful.
yeah, I'm actually near Bears Ears right now.
Okay. Wow.
I was doing a shoot out there yesterday, so yeah, it was quite cold, but very, very beautiful. It's nice to be
Yes, I
here.
was like, that doesn't look like Chicago.
I'm very glad I'm not in Chicago right now. Apparently, like, I heard it was 7 degrees last Saturday.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm like the Southwest or Santa Fe gets pretty chilly for me, so I don't know how I would fare in Chicago. All
Well,
right.
Santa
Well,
Fe is probably pretty nice right now, comparatively.
yeah, it is really nice. It's actually quite warm, so we're enjoying this dry-ish winter, though I know we need the snow. So,
Yeah.
mhm. All right, well, I have a quick little intro and then we can get started. I have my questions for you. We have a couple of folks tuned in here, so thank you everyone for joining. My name is Felicia Garcia. I'm the Curator of Education at the School for Advanced Research's Indigenous Research Center. And so for the months of January and February, I have been speaking with past ANRE interns to share a little bit about their experiences and then the diversity of possible career options for our interns. So today I am really happy to be joined by Dr. Teresa Montoya, who was a 2010-2011 ANRE intern. And we actually met at NYU while I was doing my master's degree and Teresa was finishing up her PhD in cultural anthropology. So it's kind of fun that we've come full circle and crossed paths in a couple different places here. But Teresa is Diné. She is a social scientist and media maker trained in socio-cultural anthropology, critical Indigenous studies, and filmmaking. She is currently a Provost postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Chicago, where she holds a position in the Native American and Indigenous, or in Native American and Indigenous studies. So there's a brief intro, but I would love if you would share a little bit more about yourself and your career path that brought you to this point in your life.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction, Felicia. Yeah, it is really exciting that our paths have kind of flip-flopped. Seeing as I was at SAR right before going to grad school.
Mm-hmm.
So, gosh, that was a decade ago, which feels like forever.
Right.
um, I I did actually the Peabody Essex Fellowship. So folks who are in the Native Museum realm kind of know about the major fellowships. There's SAR, Peabody Essex, and NMAI. So I was excited that I got to do all three. I did my
Mm-hmm.
rounds. I did my master's in museum anthropology at the University of Denver. So I was really keen actually in going into museum education and curation. That was kind of the main impetus for why I applied to SAR.
Mm-hmm.
And the year that I was there, I was finishing my master's thesis, which was on Navajo weavers and Navajo weaving exhibitions.
Okay.
So I got to do an Emmy exhibition when I was in Denver, a year at SAR, and working in the collections, kind of honing my museum skills while also finishing my master's thesis. So it was really a perfect place to not only learn more about the museum field, but also just have a quiet place to write and to be with other people who are doing academic work, because I was kind of at
Mm-hmm.
that moment where I was deciding what I wanted to do next. So by the end of the year, that's when I decided that I wanted to continue to do my PhD.
Awesome. And so while you were at SAR, you continued your master's thesis research?
Yeah, I worked with a Diné weaver, Roy Cady, who actually he was a part of one of the weaving workshops that was at
Okay.
SAR. She's probably in some photographs somewhere in the collections. Yeah, so we worked on an exhibition together, and then my master's thesis was kind of documenting that process and looking at the ways that other museum institutions had displayed and curated Navajo weaving, in particular actually with male weavers, because there's a lot of emphasis on women who weave, which of course there's a lot of Diné weavers who are women, but there's been less focus on the role of men in caring for this practice. So it was a lot of fun to work with him and to learn from him.
Right.
Yeah, and SAR kind of provided that support for me to get my writing done.
Right. Yeah, that's so, I mean, I'm kind of jumping around my questions here, but that's like one of my favorite things about the internship is that people have the opportunity to engage with just a range of different people, like scholars and artists, and I feel like it's just a great opportunity to exchange ideas. So it's awesome that you had that experience. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing these days. If you could share a little bit more about your daily life and your current position, I'm sure folks would love to hear about that.
Sure. Well, right now I'm sitting in a car. This has been not a conventional year by any
Right.
any means for any of us. So in my position as a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Chicago, I have a light teaching load, so I teach one course per year. Last year I taught comparative colonialism, so that's a Native Studies course, and then this past fall I taught a class on toxicity, and we did focus a lot on contamination of Indigenous territories, but also looking at how other communities of color have been impacted by environmental contamination, and then trying to understand the frameworks by which people try to understand toxicity.
Right.
So that was taught entirely online. Hopefully this fall things will resume in person. So I guess a day in my life, is prepping for teaching. I'm also working on several articles. So I've been doing some co-authored papers with folks in geography, Native studies, public health. So kind of choosing this path of academia, it lends itself towards one, being able to work with lots of different sort of people, but it also requires a lot of self-discipline in terms of planning out your day. It's not like I have to clock in sitting at a desk in an office. And then I guess the other component of my work now, which I'm really excited is still museum focused, is I'm working on an exhibition at the Field Museum. So this fall of 21, they're relaunching a whole new redesign of their Native exhibit. So like most, museums of natural history, they had a very outdated Native museum or Native gallery. So for the past few years, they've invited different Native artists and scholars to help reimagine what this gallery space could be. So I'm working on two cases, one about Navajo environmentalism. So I've been focusing on Bears Ears, which is part of the reason why I'm out here, and helping with some of their media components. And then another part is about sovereignty. And in both of those cases, I'm working with Diné artists. So that's, I think, kind of part of the reason why those of us who choose museum work is the ability to work with Native artists and to showcase their work.
Right. Yeah, that's really awesome. Is it difficult to balance your academic? I mean, I'm sure it's like there's a lot of overlap, but is it difficult to balance your academic commitments with your like independent scholarship and then your museum work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard as anything. There's definitely some weeks where it feels like my weeks are packed with Zoom meetings. So I think for me, I love using Excel spreadsheets, which is a holdover from when I actually worked in an office for 2 years after my undergrad. So I was paying off some of my loans, and I was, studying for the GREs. So I actually managed inventory for a shoe company. But I learned like the skill of spreadsheets. And so till this day, I'm a true advocate for anyone to be using spreadsheets to help manage, projects they're working on, like different writing projects. I'll put, the due date or benchmarks for when I want to have certain things done by. I've also used it just, to imagine a calendar for museum projects. And Google Calendar. So those are the ways that I try to keep organized with all the different types of projects that I'm doing, which obviously sometimes I just work out of my car, tethering from my phone, which I guess a lot of people on the res end up having to do.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see. Well, you answered some of my questions I had written here already. But I'm curious about, so you said you have like generally a lot of freedom and independence in your work as an academic, but has your daily life changed? Like, how has your daily life changed during the pandemic?
I mean, I really think it's going online. So that, like being in Chicago, that was harder. Being away from family. I'm from the Southwest. I grew up in Western Colorado. Most of my family's in Northern Arizona. So, I would drive back and forth a lot between Colorado and Arizona. Of course, going to grad school, getting my education has taken me far away from home. But I've always, I come back for Christmas break. I come back for summer break. So this year, that regular routine of going home was interrupted. So I didn't get to go home for the holidays this year, which was really hard. But that's, when there was a huge spike in cases. So I waited until kind of the holiday rush was over, and I came back here a couple weeks ago. So while I didn't get to be with my family during the holidays, it was nice to still be able to come back. So yeah, I would definitely say I think having to do a lot more stuff online has been, a challenge. But at this point, it's been nice to still try to find ways to connect with people in ways that I wouldn't have imagined before. And even doing this, maybe wouldn't have felt as intuitive.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's nice. I feel maybe more comfortable with Zoom and FaceTime formats than I used to be. So I guess that's a good adaptation.
Yes. I feel exactly the same. Do you have any projects that you've completed recently that you're particularly proud of?
Well, this project isn't completed, but it's the Field Museum exhibition, which has been ongoing. So I'm really excited about that. As I said, it's an opportunity to work with Native artists. I'm working with Nanaba Beck, who I know you highlighted last fall, and Gil Scott, who's a Diné painter, and Brent Toadlina, who's a Diné moccasin maker. So, coming home right now has been, to kind of do these media projects of the sacred landscape around Bears Ears. And then we'll eventually do media interviews with the artists when it's safer to do so. So that part of it we kind of had to postpone just, for public safety concerns. But by the summer that will be wrapped up, and then the exhibit will be opening in the fall. So I'm getting excited to see the finished product.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I have met so many different people who are participating in this redesign of the hall, and so I'm really excited to see how it turns out. All right, now I would love to pivot to talk a little bit about your experience as an ANRE intern. Could you speak a little bit about how the internship prepared you for your current position?
Well, thinking back to 10, 12 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the time, I was really interested in museum education and curation. And I think the same holds true today, that there's not a lot of Native people working in museum. I mean, there's more and more as we continue to get higher degrees, or museums are becoming more flexible with what they perceive to be the right knowledge to be in a museum. I think it's ridiculous that you have to have a PhD to be a curator, especially when Indigenous peoples who have that traditional knowledge know way more than you could ever learn from a book alone. nevertheless, when I made the decision when I was at SAR to continue on with my PhD, it was really actually the desire to continue working in museums, and to consider the possibility of becoming a curator. While I was in grad school, I continued doing research on cultural heritage issues and repatriation. And that's when I got really interested in media. So then I started doing filmmaking. So, I think the path that I took, like many people, you learn more things, and then that introduces you to new ideas and like how you want to apply that. And so what became more apparent to me was just these pressing environmental issues that were affecting, the community where I was from. So that's kind of when there was that shift that happened in terms of my own academic work. But I knew when I finished, regardless of whether I became a professor or if I continued nonprofit work, that was a little bit open-ended, kind of in the middle of my PhD. But I knew I wanted to have some sort of museum component. So in that way, I am doing what I wanted to do. And I love doing research and I love teaching. So being able to find these ways that I can continue to do museum projects on the side has been really fulfilling for me. And, that's something I definitely want to keep doing moving forward is, finding ways to continue to work with artists and in museum spaces. Because I think there's a lot of, potential there between Native artists and academics and researchers. I think, a good example of that, I don't know if anybody watched, there was this Indigenous interventions panel that was at the Field Museum or online at the Field Museum in the fall. And I thought that was like a really amazing dialogue between different artists and media makers. So those are the types of projects that I want to continue to support.
Yeah, that's great. It's really awesome to see so many museums, like you said, embracing different types of knowledge, and the kind of conversations that can happen are just so enlightening. Just one note to our audience really quickly. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. If you have any comments or questions for Teresa or for myself about the internship program, please feel free to type them in the little box there, and we'll get to them throughout the conversation. So you already talked about this, but I'm curious about like whether being in the Anne Ray internship changed your career goals, or if that really happened more when you were in grad school.
It's a good question. I would say, being at SAR and being in an environment not only with other, museum folks, and also being able to work with, artists and going out to communities. So this, unfortunately, you're probably not able to do that right now.
Right.
But, and also because there was a lot of different scholars who were coming through, through the colloquium, that is what kind of introduced me to what, academia is. So I think in that way, the Anne Ray Fellowship allowed me to see a different sort of venue for museum work, which is, museum scholarship. So that, as I said, that's kind of what helped me decide that I wanted to go for a PhD. And I was also really fortunate that when I was there, so my mentor was Melissa Nelson. So she was like the Anne Ray Fellow. And then I had a couple of other friends, Lucas Basir, Doug Keel, who were really supportive of me when I was trying to apply to grad school. So I cannot emphasize that enough. Just having someone who can even suggest programs to apply to, like I knew I was interested in museums. And a lot of museum programs also aligned with anthropology. I didn't study anthropology in my undergrad. It's not like I had that desire that I had to study anthro. So yeah, kind of getting a sense of people who were already working in academia to give me some insight about, well, where do I apply? How do I go through that process? Because it is, I think, really intimidating when you're beginning to look at all the programs out there, and even to know like what sort of financial aid is available. So I'm a strong advocate, of like paying it forward. So any other students who don't know what where to apply or where to reach out, like seriously, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to to give you the list of things that I was considering when I was at that stage, because I think that's the only way we can get, especially for scholars of color. Oh, it kind of froze for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one really awesome thing about being on campus is we have such a diversity of scholars who are in residence at any given time. And like just like you, I had a lot of conversations with the scholars who were in residence when I was an intern about like what's it like being in a PhD program, or like what are the programs to apply to. And so it was really awesome to have like that my Anne Ray fellow as a mentor, but then also all of these other scholars who provided just really amazing mentorship to me. So yeah, that's one of the like things that I feel like we don't promote too much about the internship, but it is like a huge benefit as being a part of this really cool community. Just kind of going off of that, what did you enjoy most about the Anne Ray internship?
I mean, other than living in Santa Fe, I really loved the community of folks that I was there with. We actually all just got along really well. So not just the interns, but also the other academic fellows. So we would have dinners once a week, which I don't know, maybe not every group comes together like that, but yeah, it felt like a community, and getting to know everyone on campus. So that was, I think, a really unique experience for me to have that cohort feel. Yeah, and Santa Fe is amazing. I loved being closer to home. It's only a 2.5-hour drive for me to get back to Winter Rock. So, yeah, and whenever I drive through there, I always like to, stop at my favorite restaurants, which I know we all have our lists. I really like La Chosa, so that's my local fave in Santa Fe.
Yes. When I first moved here, I went to La Chosa and was like, the chili was like way too hot for me. But now I've like adapted. I feel like that just happens when most people like move to Santa Fe. Just like green chili becomes a part of your everyday palate. But now I'm a big fan of La Chosa as well.
They're desensitized.
Yes. Let's see. I mean, you've answered a lot of my questions, but I'll ask you again. So one of my things on my list was what was your favorite thing about living in Santa Fe? And you've mentioned being close to home and the amazing restaurants, but do you have any other things that stand out about your time living here?
Well, I was there with Gloria Bell. So she was the other intern who's Métis from Canada. I think we we spent a lot of times in the collections, as all interns do. I think we did total like 1,000 mounts.
Oh, wow.
Like carving the mounts for just a lot of the smaller pottery pieces. So that's how we were able to like get through so many. It's just because we were working on such small pieces. Yeah, so I had a lot of fun just learning and becoming like good at one particular museum skill. We also did online exhibits. So I know that's not something that every internship year has done. But yeah, we were each given the opportunity to select objects from the collection, and then basically curate an online exhibit and tell the story of these particular objects. So for that, I knew I wanted to interview artists, and I didn't have any sort of filmmaking experience at that point in time. But Melissa Nelson, who was my mentor, lent me her camera. And one of the other fellows also had filmmaking experience. So between the two of them, they taught me the basics of, how to use a camera and very basic editing experience. So that also kind of cemented my my interest in filmmaking, which I eventually took up later at NYU during my PhD program. But the first time I actually tried filmmaking was actually for this online exhibit where I interviewed Native artists. And I worked with Marla Allerson and Eric Chapito, who were both former Native artists who had, what are they called? Just the Native Artist Fellowship. Yeah.
That's so awesome. I'm gonna have to do some research about your project. But we have started to bring back the online exhibitions as like I think it'll be a core part of the internship program now with everything being virtual. The interns have the opportunity to curate a small exhibition in the vault every year, but we haven't had any tours since last March, I think. And so we're going to take the exhibitions online, and I'm really excited to share what our current interns have been working on because they have some really cool exhibits.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing way to connect folks, even, beyond Santa Fe or the orbit of people who are familiar with those collections. So I'm happy to hear that, maybe that was a COVID intervention as
Yeah.
well, is trying to think more of ways to connect online.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's just really interesting to see how different people interpret the collection and what stands out. Since it's not like really curated, or there isn't like a really strong narration throughout, and I feel like everyone has their like a different experience going through the space, and so it's just fun to see the different ideas that people come up with.
Are people still allowed in the collection, like researchers or community members?
We've been kind of navigating that. Right now, it's just been staff members just because the space is so small. And our collections manager and then assistant collections manager spend a lot of time in there doing work. And so we've accommodated a couple of research visits when Venancio Aragon was on campus as a fellow. He did a couple of visits with Molly. And so, yeah, we've had a couple, but we're, I think, trying to think about how we can do things more virtually. Since, we know a lot of scholars or artists are not based in Santa Fe and they might want to access the collection. So, yeah, this pandemic is just inspiring us to think in new ways and help people continue to connect with the collection, even if it's not face to face or, yeah. Let's see. Okay, we have a
Is
couple more people.
anything, and now I'm asking questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, are any of the are you like facilitating like virtual visits with folks?
So I haven't done any, but Diego Medina, our education assistant, did a really amazing school visit. He had, I think, like 100 kindergartners do like a virtual field trip with him in the vaults, which I'm just so impressed that he was able to facilitate that. And I think it was really fun for the kids too, just to have something different, that they're doing in their daily virtual lives. And then our registrar, Jennifer Day, and then Stephanie Riley, they are in the middle of a collections review with one of the Pueblo communities. And so since we can't have people come into the vaults, or like a group of people come into the vaults, they've been facilitating virtual collections reviews, which is really awesome that they've been able to adapt that process.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm like, sometimes I forget that like people are probably really interested in the things that we're doing and like how we've adapted and like how we've continued to do some of our regular programs. And so maybe we should be sharing some more blog posts about these new virtual ventures.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, because museums are so public facing, like it's I think a challenge. Like, how do you keep the public involved and
right.
interested? And especially with your institution, because now you have such a strong connection to Native communities. So how to keep those connections strong?
Yes, exactly. And Alicia Poon, our director, just added a comment that the vaults are open for one-on-one community visits as well as virtual visits. So if you are interested, if you're a Santa Fe local, we might be able to accommodate a one-on-one visit, and then we are starting to do virtual visits as well. So definitely reach out. And then we have a question from Amy, who works at SAR. She asks, does Dr. Montoya have a favorite piece in the collection?
Ooh. Um, well, as I recall, I really loved Marla Allison's paintings. Um, and maybe I'm more familiar with it because I did that online exhibition with her,
Mm-hmm.
and I did the interview. And I can't remember the name of the piece, but it's a painting, and I think I've seen it on a lot of the SAR like marketing material. It's her. She's
Mm-hmm.
sitting in front of the painting, and she has a pottery. Um, so that inspiration is from her community near Mesita in New Mexico. And so she, used the pottery from the collection as inspiration for her painting, and she incorporated those pottery motifs into the sky and the um, the outline of the mesa.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of always stuck with me, is the ways that contemporary artists are using pieces from the collection and incorporating those designs into their work in really innovative ways. And same with Eric Chapito's work. He also looked at some of the sash belts in the collection
Mm-hmm.
and then relearned some of those methods, which he was able to reincorporate into his own sash belt making. Um, so yeah, I think the pieces that have a story with it,
Mm-hmm.
and of course living artists are ones that I'm more able to readily remember even now,
Mm-hmm.
12 years later.
Right.
And I think one of the amazing things with SAR is the fact that so many Native artists can go and connect with the collections, and to try to keep those methods or designs alive in new ways, or even to go back and understand the stories that are connected with a particular design or an animal that's featured in the
Mm-hmm.
pieces. Um, and that was something that I was able to experience more at SAR versus other collections or museums that I've worked in. That there was kind of a stronger community component, and maybe that's just because SAR is so close to communities, but also I think because the staff at SAR are really invested in trying to make sure that communities are involved in what's happening on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely my favorite part of my job is connecting with community members and, being able to provide access to the collection and the resources that we have. So, yeah, it's been challenging this year to not be able to connect in person, but it's fun to try and figure out new ways that we can facilitate those interactions and connections. Let's see. All right, and I just have one more question for you. And so if anyone in the audience has a question or a comment, please feel free to type it in the little box there. But my last question is if you have any advice for aspiring Indigenous museum professionals.
Yeah, as I said, I think having a network of supporters is important. So asking people who are in the positions that you want to learn about,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like this forum right now is like, what was their path? Understanding, what were their considerations for when they were applying for programs, and kind of, not being afraid to reach out for help. So as I said, if anyone watching, has questions or curiosities, I'm happy to provide some advice over email. Um, Secondly, I think there's a lot of financial aid out there, but it takes knowing, the right sources. So not only your own tribal communities, but, there's also the American Indian Graduate Center. Ford Foundation, I think, is an amazing resource. And they do support, Native American students at the graduate level. So, I was a recipient of a predoctoral fellowship. And I think they've been very supportive of students of color. So anyone who's considering graduate school, I would definitely say Ford Foundation is a source to look to. And I guess the other thing, in terms of when you're deciding on a career path, is it just comes down to passion, because graduate school does take a really long time, as you know, and it takes you far from being at home.
Yes.
So something that you are passionate about, and in a way that will uphold your connection to community or family or whatever makes you feel good. I think that's something that you need to keep in mind, because, you know, at the end of the day, there's going to be days when maybe you don't feel like writing anymore, or you're feeling homesick. So being able to dig deep and know that what you're studying or what you're doing is going to, you know, bring you closer to, you know, helping your community, or, you know, helping educate about Native issues, or whatever it is that you're passionate about. I'd say that's probably my number one advice is, yeah, you need to feel passionate about it. And not everyone needs to go to graduate school, you know, like I do think that, you know, there's positions out there, if you want to work closer to home, and, you know, you don't want to go far away. So I think just being open to the different options, and, you know, not feeling too much pressure that you have to do a particular thing, or you have to study something, because from other people that I've talked to, maybe that was one of their regrets, is maybe they'll feel too pressured to do a particular path and not following their own passion. So yes, that's kind of how I came to be, you know, an academic, but also someone who continues to do museum stuff on the side, because that's my passion, is still connecting with artists and, you know, collaborating on these projects. So
thank you. That's some really great advice, and it definitely resonates with me, and I try to apply what you're saying to my own life. So yeah, thank you very much. I think that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, even if you're in your car. And I hope you enjoy your time being out here on the land, and spending time with your family.
yeah, thank you. No, thanks so much for inviting me. I was really excited to hear from you, because, as you said, we had that connection in New York, and it felt like we were always both in and out of the city at different times.
Yes.
And it also makes me excited too that, you know, I think a lot of folks who are still working at SAR, and I would see them at Art Market, or continue to see what they're doing. So I try to keep tabs on what people are doing, and get excited when I saw that you were in this position now. So hopefully it won't be too long that we can run into each other at Art Market or some other
Yes,
event in the future.
and if you're in Santa Fe, we'd love to host you for a collections visit if you'd like to revisit the vaults. So yeah, definitely just stay in touch. It was really nice chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye.